Earth, 2027. The world had changed dramatically since first contact 3 years ago. The revelation that multiple alien civilizations had been observing humanity for centuries sent shockwaves through society. Giant ships still hovered in orbit, visible on clear nights. A constant reminder that humans were no longer alone. Mark Landon's life, however, remained stubbornly ordinary. At 29, he owned a small ranch-style house on the outskirts of Millbrook, Ohio. Population 12,483. The house needed paint and the lawn could use some work, but it was his. He'd bought it cheap after his last relationship ended badly 2 years ago, wanting somewhere quiet to rebuild his life. On a muggy Tuesday in July, Mark was underneath a Chevy Impala at Johnson's Auto Repair when his boss Joe kicked his foot. "Earth to Landon. You planning to live under there?" Mark slid out from under the car, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Just finishing up the oil change." "Well, finish it later. Your mail got delivered here again." Joe tossed a thick envelope onto Mark's chest. It landed with a soft thud. The envelope was heavy, made of expensive cream-colored paper. A gold Department of Extraterrestrial Affairs seal gleamed in the corner. Mark sat up, frowning. He never got government mail. "Looks fancy," Joe commented, peering over his shoulder. "Maybe you won lottery." "Yeah, right." Mark turned the envelope over. His name and address were printed in crisp black letters. No return address. He didn't open it until that evening, after microwaving a frozen dinner and settling into his worn leather recliner. A garage sale find that had become his favorite spot in the house. The TV murmured in the background, showing yet another debate about the latest alien trade agreements. The letter inside was printed on the same cream paper as the envelope. "Dear Mr. Landon, you have been selected as a participant in Project Harmony, a joint initiative between Earth governments and our extraterrestrial allies. This program aims to strengthen diplomatic relations through arranged marriages between human citizens and compatible alien species. Our comprehensive compatibility algorithms have identified you as an ideal candidate. Your psychological profile, genetic markers, and social history indicate exceptional potential for successful integration with multiple partner species. You have been assigned 3 marriage partners from the following civilizations: Raintar Collective, Vulcanara Empire, Ephyra Confederation. A representative will visit within 48 hours to provide detailed information and begin integration procedures. Participation is mandatory under Earth Treaty 2027-A3. Non-compliance will result in significant penalties. Congratulations on your selection for this historic program. Sincerely, Dr. Elena Martinez, Director, Project Harmony." Mark read the letter 3 times, his frozen dinner forgotten. This had to be a joke. Probably Ryan from work. He was always pulling pranks, but that seal had looked awfully real. His hands shook slightly as he dug his phone out of his pocket and Googled Project Harmony. Dozens of news articles popped up. The most recent, from that morning's New York Times, announced that the first wave of marriages would begin this month. 300 humans had been selected worldwide. Mark's stomach lurched. The TV chose that moment to switch to a news update. Project Harmony participants are being notified this week. Sources say some humans have been matched with multiple partners to account for different cultural practices among alien species. He muted the TV and let the letter fall to the floor. 3 wives. They were giving him 3 alien wives. Him, Mark Landon, who hadn't had a date in 2 years, and whose most meaningful relationship was with his recliner. "This can't be happening," he muttered to his empty living room. But deep down he knew it was. The world had changed, and his quiet life was about to change with it. The next morning, Mark wiped the grease from his hands, eyeing the timing belt he'd just replaced. Another successful repair at Johnson's Auto, though his thoughts kept drifting to the strange letter sitting on his kitchen counter at home. The government seal had seemed authentic enough, but the contents were too bizarre to be real. The shop's radio crackled with news about the latest developments in human-alien relations. 5 years after first contact, and people still couldn't stop talking about it. Mark tuned it out, focusing instead on closing up for the day. "Hey, Landon," Joe, his boss, called from the office. "There's some folks here to see you. Say they're from the government." Mark's stomach dropped. 2 figures in crisp suits stood in the doorway, their badges gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "Mr. Landon," the taller one said, "I'm Agent Chen, and this is Agent Rodriguez. We're here about Project Harmony." "The marriage program?" Mark's voice cracked. "Look, there must be some mistake. I never signed up for—" "Participation isn't voluntary, Mr. Landon," Agent Rodriguez cut in. "You've been selected based on comprehensive compatibility algorithms." Mark leaned against a workbench. "So that letter wasn't a joke?" "Not only is it real," Agent Chen said, "but you've been chosen for a special case. You're being assigned 3 wives." The wrench Mark had been holding clattered to the floor. "3? Your living situation has already been evaluated. Your home meets the minimum requirements for a family of 4. "This is insane," Mark muttered. "I can barely handle my own life, let alone—" "Your first wife arrives tomorrow," Agent Rodriguez interrupted, checking her tablet. "The others will follow within 48 hours. "Tomorrow?" Mark's voice rose. "I haven't even had time to process this." "Here's your information packet." Agent Chen handed him a thick manila envelope. "Everything you need to know about your wives, species, and cultural requirements is inside." After they left, Mark sat in his truck, staring at the envelope. Inside were 3 photos. The first showed a tall woman with pale skin and sharp features. Alexia, Reintar species, was printed beneath. The second depicted a shorter woman with olive skin and what looked like barely contained energy in her stance. Zira, Vulcanara species. The third showed a willowy figure with warm brown skin and gentle eyes. Kalia, Ephira species. That night, Mark paced his small house, running his hands through his dark hair. The place suddenly seemed inadequate. His bachelor pad consisted of a modest living room, kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a bathroom. Where would everyone sleep? The doorbell rang at exactly 9 a.m. the next morning. Mark opened it to find Alexia standing there, her posture perfect, holding a precisely packed suitcase. "Greetings, husband," she said, extending her hand. "I've calculated that our compatibility rating is 87.3%, which exceeds the program's requirements by 12.4 percentage points." Before Mark could respond, the sound of running feet approached, and suddenly Zira appeared, vaulting over Alexia's suitcase. "Ha! First one inside wins," she declared, sprinting past Mark into the house. "You weren't scheduled to arrive until tomorrow," Alexia said, frowning. "Boring." "Why wait?" Zira called from somewhere inside. A soft touch on Mark's shoulder made him jump. Kalia stood behind him, somehow having approached without a sound. Her eyes seemed to see right through him. "You're overwhelmed," she said softly. "Your emotions are chaotic." Mark backed away, bumping into the doorframe. "Look, all of you, I'm not ready for this. I didn't ask for—" "I've already developed an optimal living arrangement schedule," Alexia announced, pulling out a tablet, "including bathroom rotation, meal planning, and designated quiet hours." A crash came from the kitchen, followed by Zira's voice. "Hey, who wants to race to see who can organize their stuff fastest?" "That would disrupt the efficiency of my proposed system," Alexia protested. Kalia moved closer to Mark, her presence oddly calming despite the chaos. "Your heart rate is elevated. Shall I help you find your center?" "My what?" Mark stepped back again, only to collide with Alexia's suitcase. The rest of the morning descended into beautiful chaos. Alexia attempted to implement her systems while Zira deliberately disrupted them, turning everything into a competition. Kalia drifted through the house, occasionally touching things and commenting on the emotional residue they contained. By noon, Mark sat on his couch, now relocated by Zira during what she called extreme furniture racing, watching his once quiet home transform into something unrecognizable. Alexia had covered one wall with complex charts and schedules. Zira had somehow turned the spare bedroom into what she called a victory vault. Kalia had filled the house with strange crystals that she claimed helped balance the emotional frequencies. Through the window, he could see his neighbors gathering, pointing and whispering. Mrs. Henderson from next door nearly dropped her gardening shears when Zira challenged Alexia to a handstand contest on the front lawn. "This is just the first day," Mark muttered to himself, watching Kalia attempt to mediate between her competitive sister wives while simultaneously trying to harmonize their conflicting auras. The sound of another crash from the kitchen made him wince. 3 wives. 3 alien wives. His peaceful life had just become anything but quiet. By late afternoon, Mark's home had become unrecognizable. Alexia had commandeered the dining room table, spreading out detailed floor plans and what looked like mathematical formulas for optimal space utilization. Her long fingers traced precise patterns across the papers as she muttered calculations under her breath. "The current arrangement is inefficient," she declared, straightening her already perfect posture. "We must maximize our living space by implementing a rotating schedule of—" A loud thump from upstairs interrupted her, followed by Zira's triumphant shout. "Personal best. Unpacked 3 boxes in under 2 minutes. That is not the proper way to organize belongings," Alexia called up, her pale features pinched with disapproval. "There are protocols. Protocols are for losers." Zira appeared at the top of the stairs, grinning. Her olive skin gleamed with a slight sheen of what might have been competitive unpacking sweat. "Hey Mark, want to race me to see who can sort the kitchen cabinets faster?" Before Mark could respond, Kalia emerged from the living room, her movements fluid and graceful. The emotional resonance in this space is discordant. She held up one of her crystals, which seemed to pulse with a faint inner light. "Perhaps we should all take a moment to align our energies." "I don't require energy alignment," Alexia stated. "My calculations are perfectly—" "Bet I can align faster than you," Zira interrupted, bounding down the stairs. Mark slipped away during the ensuing debate about whether spiritual alignment could be quantified and timed. He retreated to his garage, the only space still untouched by alien influence, and leaned against his tool chest, taking deep breaths. Through the window, he could see more neighbors gathering. Old Mr. Peterson was actually recording with his phone. A group of teenagers had stopped their bikes to stare, as Zira did cartwheels across the front lawn, while Alexia loudly calculated the statistical probability of injury. The garage door opened quietly, and Kalia stepped in. "You're seeking solitude," she said. It wasn't a question. "I just need a minute," Mark replied, running a hand through his hair. She nodded, her warm brown eyes understanding. "Change creates emotional turbulence. It's natural." "Natural? None of this is natural." He gestured vaguely toward the house. "Yesterday I was just a mechanic. Now I'm supposed to be some kind of intergalactic husband." "You fear you are inadequate to the task," Kalia observed. She moved closer, and Mark felt an inexplicable wave of calm wash over him. "Yet your aura suggests otherwise." Before Mark could ask what exactly his aura was suggesting, the garage door burst open. Zira stood there, practically vibrating with energy. "Hey, no fair having private bonding time without competition. I challenge you both to—" "According to my schedules," Alexia appeared behind her, tablet in hand. "This is designated group integration period. We should all be participating in structured relationship-building exercises." Mark looked between his 3 new wives, the logical mathematician, the perpetual competitor, and the emotional empath, and realized his life would never be the same. The question was, would that turn out to be a good thing? The structured relationship-building exercises turned out to be exactly as rigid as Mark feared. Alexia had created an extensive PowerPoint presentation complete with relationship metrics, compatibility graphs, and something she called optimal bonding trajectories. "These charts clearly demonstrate the most efficient path to collective harmony," she explained, standing before them in the living room. Mark sat awkwardly on the couch between Zira, who was doing one-handed push-ups on the floor, and Kalia, who kept touching his arm whenever his anxiety spiked. "Question!" Zira sprang up. "Can we turn this into a competition? First one to reach optimal bonding wins." Alexia's eye twitched slightly. "Bonding cannot be quantified as a race." "Sure it can. Everything's a race if you try hard enough." Zira winked at Mark. "Bet I can bond with him faster than both of you combined." "That's not how emotional connections work," Kalia said softly, her hand brushing Mark's shoulder. "I can sense our husband's discomfort with forcing such things." Mark shifted uncomfortably. "Look, maybe we could just talk? Like normal people?" 3 pairs of eyes turned to him with varying degrees of confusion. "Define normal," Alexia requested, pulling out her tablet. "I'll need parameters for this conversational framework." "I bet I can talk more normally than anyone," Zira declared. Perhaps, Kalia suggested, we should let Mark guide this interaction? Mark ran a hand through his hair. Okay, why don't you tell me about yourselves? Your worlds, your cultures. This proved to be both the right and wrong question to ask. Alexia immediately launched into a detailed historical analysis of the Raintar Collective's mathematical evolution. Zira interrupted with increasingly outlandish tales of Vulcanaran athletic achievements. Kalia tried to describe Epheron emotional resonance patterns through interpretive hand gestures. And that's why all our architecture is based on the Fibonacci sequence, Alexia was saying. Once wrestled a quantum bear with just my left pinky, Zira boasted. The harmonic convergence of souls transcends physical dimensions, Kalia mused. Mark's head spun. He stood up abruptly. I need some air. The evening air was cool on his face as he stepped onto his front porch. Behind him, he could hear his wives debating whether to follow him. Alexia was consulting her schedule to see if this was an approved solitude period. Zira wanted to race him around the block. Kalia was concerned about his emotional wavelengths. Quite the collection you've got there, son. Mark turned to find Mr. Peterson, his elderly neighbor, leaning on the fence. The old man's expression was somewhere between amusement and concern. It's not what you think, Mark started, then realized he had no idea what anyone would think of this situation. Oh? So you haven't got 3 alien wives trying to turn your house into a circus? Mark felt heat rise to his face. They're different, he admitted, leaning against the porch railing. But interesting. As if on cue, Zira bounded out the front door, dressed in what appeared to be workout gear that hugged her athletic frame. Mark, race you around the block. Winner gets first kiss. Before he could respond, she was already sprinting down the sidewalk, her olive skin gleaming in the evening light. Despite himself, Mark found his eyes following her powerful, graceful movements. Your cortisol levels are elevated, came Kalia's soft voice behind him. She stepped close, her presence bringing that now familiar wave of calm. The thin fabric of her dress whispered against his arm. But there's something else, too. Attraction? Mark swallowed hard. He couldn't deny the effect these women were having on him, each in their own unique way. Alexia emerged from the house, her tablet forgotten for once. The setting sun caught her pale features, highlighting her elegant bone structure. According to my calculations, this would be an optimal moment for initial physical contact. She moved closer, her analytical expression softening slightly. If you're amenable, Mark's pulse quickened as he found himself suddenly surrounded by his 3 wives, each radiating their own distinct kind of appeal. Zira jogged back up, barely winded. Ha! I win! So, about that kiss. Actually, Kalia interjected, her fingers trailing along Mark's arm. I believe our husband's emotional signature suggests he's attracted to all of us. Of course he is, Zira grinned. We're awesome, but I'm clearly the most awesome. That's not a measurable metric, Alexia protested, but there was a playful glint in her eye that Mark hadn't seen before. Looking at them now, Mark realized something he'd been too overwhelmed to notice earlier. Yes, they were aliens. Yes, this situation was bizarre. But they were also beautiful, fascinating women who, for whatever reason, had been chosen to be his wives. A first kiss should follow logical progression, Alexia stated, stepping closer to Mark. Her cool composure slipped slightly as their eyes met. Though I find my usual calculations somewhat disrupted by your proximity. Zira bounced on her toes, radiating competitive energy. Forget logic. I won the race. I claim my prize. But despite her bold words, there was a hint of genuine nervousness in her playful smile. Your emotions are intense, Kalia murmured, her hand still resting on Mark's arm. All of ours are. Mark felt the last of his resistance melting away. These women might be aliens, might have been assigned to him by some government program, but there was no denying the chemistry building between them. Maybe, he said carefully, looking at each of them in turn, we could start over, get to know each other properly without schedules or competitions or emotional resonance readings. I suppose my optimization algorithms could allow for some flexibility. Alexia conceded, a slight blush coloring her pale cheeks. And maybe not everything has to be a race, Zira admitted, moving closer until Mark could feel the heat radiating from her athletic frame. Kalia simply smiled, her presence a soothing counterpoint to the electric tension in the air. Mark took a deep breath. Dinner? Just the four of us. We could talk, like regular people on a first date. First date? Zira's eyes lit up. I bet I can be the best date. She caught herself and grinned sheepishly. I mean, yes, dinner sounds nice. I'll calculate the optimal restaurant choices, Alexia said, reaching for her tablet, then stopping herself. Or we could simply choose one that appeals to us all. The emotional harmony is improving already, Kalia observed, her fingers trailing down Mark's arm in a way that sent pleasant shivers through him. As they headed inside to get ready, Mark realized he was actually looking forward to dinner. His wives might be aliens, but they were becoming more intriguing by the minute, and judging by the looks they kept giving him, the feeling was mutual. The local Italian restaurant wasn't fancy, but it was quiet and intimate, perfect for a first date with 3 alien wives. Mark had picked one of the larger corner booths, tucked away from curious stares. He couldn't help but notice how each of his wives had dressed for the occasion in her own distinct way. Alexia wore a precisely tailored black dress, her pale skin almost luminescent in the restaurant's soft lighting. She kept checking her tablet, then catching herself and putting it away, clearly trying to resist the urge to optimize their dining experience. Zira had somehow turned getting dressed up into a competition with herself, arriving in a figure-hugging green dress that showed off her athletic build. She practically vibrated with contained energy, her olive skin glowing as she scanned the menu like she was planning to race through dinner. Kalia's flowing silk dress in deep blue seemed to move with a life of its own. She sat close to Mark, occasionally brushing against him in a way that sent pleasant tingles through his body. Her warm brown eyes held his gaze whenever he looked her way. I've analyzed the menu for optimal nutritional combinations, Alexia announced, then bit her lip. Though perhaps we should simply order what appeals to us? I could eat everything on here twice, Zira declared. Bet I could finish faster than... She stopped herself with visible effort. I mean, the pasta looks good. Your anticipation is delicious, Kalia murmured to Mark, her shoulder brushing his. All of our energies are aligning rather nicely. Mark found himself relaxing despite the unusual situation. The wine helped, but mostly it was the way his wives were trying so hard to connect with him and each other as people rather than alien species. Tell me about your homes, he suggested. Not the official stuff. What was it like growing up there? The stories that followed were fascinating. Alexia described cities built like mathematical puzzles, where children learned calculus before walking. But her voice softened when she spoke about secretly reading romance novels, trying to understand emotions through equations. Zira painted pictures of a world where every interaction was a friendly contest, but admitted sometimes she just wanted to sit quietly and watch the sunset without having to race it. Kalia's tales of empathic communities were mesmerizing, though she confessed it was occasionally overwhelming, feeling everything everyone felt. Sometimes I just wanted to feel my own emotions, she said softly, her hand finding marks under the table. The touch sent a spark through him that had nothing to do with alien empathy. He was becoming increasingly aware of how attracted he was to each of them, in very different but equally powerful ways. The next few days settled into a rhythm that was anything but ordinary. Mark found himself waking up to the scent of coffee, precisely brewed to optimal temperature by Alexia, who had somehow calculated his perfect caffeine requirements. She would greet him in the kitchen, her tall frame graceful as she moved about in what appeared to be silk pajamas. "Good morning, husband," she'd say, her usual clinical tone softening when their eyes met. "I've prepared your coffee to exact specifications." Her fingers would brush his as she handed him the mug, lingering just a moment longer than necessary. His morning shower schedule was constantly disrupted by Zira's playful challenges. "Bet I can wash your back better than you can," she'd call through the door, her voice mixing with the sound of running water. More than once he'd found himself flustered by her athletic silhouette through the steamy glass. Kalia preferred quieter moments. She would find him in the garage while he worked on cars, her presence a soothing balm after a long day. "Your hands are so skilled," she'd murmur, watching him work. "The way you fix things, it resonates with such purpose." Her touch would send shivers down his spine that had nothing to do with her empathic abilities. One evening, after a particularly challenging day at the shop, Mark came home to find all three wives in various states of domestic activity. Alexia was organizing the bookshelf according to some complex system only she understood, her dress hugging her curves as she stretched to reach higher shelves. "Mark, perfect timing," Zira called from the kitchen, where she was apparently trying to set a new record for fastest dinner preparation. Her workout clothes left little to the imagination as she moved with athletic grace between counters. Kalia emerged from the living room, her flowing dress swirling around her legs. "You're tired," she observed, moving close enough that he could smell her exotic perfume. But also, happy? He was. Despite the strangeness of it all, Mark found himself increasingly drawn to each of his wives. Alexia's brilliant mind and hidden passion beneath her logical exterior. Zira's boundless energy and the way her competitive nature masked a genuine desire to excel for him. Kalia's deep emotional understanding and the genuine warmth she brought to every interaction. "I am happy," he admitted, looking between them. "This isn't anything like what I expected, but our compatibility quotient continues to rise," Alexia finished, a rare smile gracing her features. "And I'm totally winning at being the best wife," Zira grinned, then ducked as Alexia threw a napkin at her. "Your emotions suggest you're attracted to all of us," Kalia observed with a knowing smile. "Equally, but differently." Mark felt heat rise to his face, but he didn't deny it. How could he, when each of them affected him in such unique and powerful ways? The peaceful morning routine shattered when Mark came downstairs to find Alexia and Zira in a heated debate. "A romantic evening requires careful planning," Alexia insisted, her tablet displaying elaborate charts. "I've calculated the perfect sequence of events to maximize intimacy." "Boring," Zira countered, already dressed in form-fitting workout gear. "Mark needs excitement, adventure. I'm taking him rock climbing, then skinny dipping in the lake." "Your proposal lacks structure and carries unnecessary physical risk." "Your proposal sounds like a business meeting with mood lighting." Mark felt a gentle touch on his arm. Kalia stood beside him, her presence calming despite the tension. "They both want to please you," she murmured. "Their methods differ, but the emotion behind them is the same." Looking at his wives, Mark couldn't help but notice how beautiful each was in her own way. Alexia's elegant features were flushed with passion despite her logical arguments. Zira's athletic frame practically vibrated with energy as she paced, and Kalia, her knowing smile suggested she felt exactly how affected he was by all of them. "Ladies," he said carefully, "maybe we could—" A rock crashed through the kitchen window. All four of them froze. On the rock was a note, "Aliens go home." Zira immediately dropped into a fighting stance. "I'll catch whoever did this. Nobody outruns me." "We should analyze the projectile's trajectory," Alexia began, but her usual clinical tone wavered slightly. Kalia pressed closer to Mark, her empathic abilities picking up the neighborhood's hostility. "There's so much fear, anger." Through the broken window, Mark could see a group of neighbors gathering, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright disgust. Mrs. Henderson was on her phone, probably calling the neighborhood association. Mr. Peterson stood in his driveway, shaking his head. "This is our home," Mark said firmly, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. "All of us, together." His wives turned to him, their competitive tension forgotten. Something shifted in that moment. They weren't just three alien women assigned to him anymore. They were his family. "Together?" Alexia echoed, reaching for his hand. "Nobody messes with my family," Zira declared, her protective instincts overriding her competitive nature. Kalia touched his other hand. "Your emotions, they're so strong. You really do care for us." "Of course I do," Mark admitted. "Each of you, in different ways. And I'm not letting anyone drive you away." The heat in Alexia's gaze had nothing to do with mathematical precision. Zira's competitive energy transformed into something more intimate. Kalia's emotional awareness reflected their growing attraction back at him. The aftermath of the rock-throwing incident changed things. Mark found himself increasingly protective of his unusual family, even as their dynamic grew more complex. That evening, after boarding up the broken window, he discovered each wife processing the event in her own characteristic way. Alexia had transformed the dining room into a tactical center, papers spread across the table. "I've mapped every potential security vulnerability," she explained, her usual composure slipping to reveal genuine concern. "Though my calculations keep being disturbed by emotional variables." Mark moved behind her chair, resting his hands on her shoulders. She stiffened for a moment, then relaxed into his touch. "It's okay to be scared," he said softly. "Fear is illogical," she muttered, but leaned back against him. "Though your proximity does seem to stabilize my thought processes." In the living room, Zira had rearranged the furniture into what she called a defensive configuration. She was doing push-ups at an impressive rate, her athletic form moving with controlled power. "Try to throw rocks at us now," she growled between sets. "I'll show them." "Hey," Mark caught her arm as she stood, pulling her close. "We'll handle this together." She melted against him surprisingly easily for someone so fierce. "I could protect you better if you'd let me install that laser security system." "No lasers," he chuckled, but held her tighter. He found Kalia in the garden, surrounded by her crystals. Her eyes were closed, face troubled. "The neighborhood's emotions are so dark," she whispered as he approached. "Except here, with us, with you." Mark sat beside her and she immediately curled into his side. "What do you feel from me?" he asked, curious. Her smile was knowing. Protection, desire, growing love. Her fingers traced patterns on his arm. "For all of us." Later that night, as they all sat together in the living room, Mark realized how much his feelings had evolved. What had started as an imposed arrangement had become something real, something worth fighting for. "We should reinforce the windows," Alexia suggested, but she was curled against his left side rather than consulting her tablet. "I'll patrol the perimeter," Zira declared from his right, though she seemed more interested in nuzzling his neck than actual surveillance. Kalia sat at his feet, her head resting against his knee. "Your protective instincts are quite attractive," she murmured. The tension in the room shifted from defensive to something more intimate. Mark found himself hyper-aware of each point of contact, each soft breath, each lingering touch. "Perhaps," Alexia said hesitantly, her usual certainty wavering, "it would be logical to maintain proximity tonight, for security purposes." Zira, still pressed against Mark's side, nodded vigorously. "Safety in numbers. Plus, I bet I could fight off intruders faster from a central location." "Your emotional signatures suggest you both just want to be close to Mark," Kalia observed with a gentle smile. "As do I." Mark's bedroom wasn't designed for 4 people, but somehow they made it work. His king-size bed became a nest of blankets and pillows, with him at the center of a complex arrangement of limbs and soft breathing. Alexia lay on his left, her analytical mind seemingly at war with her desire for physical comfort. She'd changed into silk pajamas that did little to hide her elegant frame. "This arrangement provides optimal protection vectors," she murmured, inching closer. Zira had claimed his right side, her athletic body radiating warmth through the tank top and shorts she wore. "I'm definitely the best at cuddling," she whispered, then caught herself. "I mean, if we were competing, which we're not, tonight?" Kalia curled up against his chest, her presence acting like an emotional anchor for all of them. Her nightgown was soft against his skin. "Your emotions are intense," she observed. "All of ours are." The intimacy of the moment wasn't lost on any of them. Mark found himself surrounded by the unique scents and sensations of his wives. Alexia's subtle perfume, Zira's clean soap smell, Kalia's exotic fragrance. "I'll protect you," he promised softly, "all of you." Alexia's precise movements softened as she relaxed against him. Zira's competitive energy mellowed into something more tender. Kalia's empathic abilities seemed to amplify their growing connection. As they drifted off to sleep, Mark realized that what had started as a government program had become something real. These weren't just his assigned wives anymore. They were his family, and he would do anything to keep them safe. Mark woke to a tangle of warmth and soft skin. Alexia had abandoned her usual rigidity in sleep, her long form curved against his side. Zira, typically restless, was peacefully draped across his chest. Kalaya's gentle presence wrapped around them all like a protective blanket. The peaceful moment shattered with a loud knock at the front door. "Local authorities," Alexia mumbled, instantly alert. "Their vehicles arrived approximately 2.3 minutes ago." "I'll handle them," Zira declared, already moving with athletic grace. "No one's faster at dealing with bureaucrats." "Their emotional signatures are hostile," Kalaya warned, pressing closer to Mark. Mark carefully disentangled himself from his wives, though not without appreciating how beautiful they each looked in the morning light. "I'll talk to them. This is our home, our family." He found 2 police officers and a city council representative on his porch. Behind them, a small crowd of neighbors had gathered, including Mrs. Henderson with her ever-present phone. "Mr. Landon," the council representative began, "we've received numerous complaints about your unusual living situation." "My marriage is legal under Project Harmony," Mark stated firmly. "Perhaps, but there are concerns about public safety and property values. Some residents feel uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable?" Zira appeared beside Mark, radiating protective energy. "We haven't done anything wrong." Alexia joined them, tablet in hand. "I can cite exactly 27 legal precedents protecting our rights." Kalia moved to Mark's other side, her presence strengthening his resolve. "Our bond is real," she said softly. "They can feel it, and it frightens them." The council representative shifted uncomfortably. "Nevertheless, we're reviewing the legality of multiple alien spouses in residential zones. Until then..." A new commotion drew their attention. A group of protesters had appeared at the end of the street, carrying signs about alien rights and forced integration. "Your human governments cannot dictate our people's freedom," their leader shouted. "We're here to liberate our sisters." Mark felt his wives press closer. Alexia's hand found his, her grip surprisingly emotional. Zira's protective stance screamed, "Try it," while Kalia's empathic presence radiated their shared determination. "Nobody's liberating anyone," Mark declared, loud enough for all to hear. "This is our choice, our family." "The statistical probability of such rapid emotional bonding," Alexia began, then stopped herself. "That is, I choose this, I choose him, based on more than calculations." "Try to separate us," Zira challenged. "I'll race you all into next week." "Our emotional resonance is genuine," Kalia added, "and growing stronger." Mark looked at each of his wives, the logical mathematician whose touch had become anything but clinical, the fierce competitor who now fought for their family rather than victory, and the gentle empath whose feelings matched his own growing love. The protesters surged forward, led by a tall Raintar who looked at Alexia with what he probably thought was concern. "Sister, you cannot truly wish to remain in this primitive dwelling with this human." Mark felt Alexia's grip tighten on his hand. Her voice, when she spoke, held none of its usual analytical distance. "My calculations indicate a 100% certainty that you should leave. Now, your competitive spirit is being suppressed," a muscular Volcanaran woman called to Zira. "These humans are making you soft." Zira's laugh held a dangerous edge. "Soft? Want to test that theory? I bet I can throw you farther than you can run." "Your emotional frequencies are being contaminated," an Ephyran elder told Kalia. "We can feel your confusion." "What you feel," Kalia interrupted, her usual gentleness hardening, "is love. Pure, uncontaminated, and freely given." The council representative tried to regain control of the situation. "Mr. Landon, given the circumstances, perhaps it would be best if..." "If what?" Mark challenged, his arms sliding around Alexia's waist as Zira pressed against his other side, and Kalaya's hand rested on his shoulder. "If I give up my family because some people are uncomfortable? If I let these activists rescue my wives from a situation they chose?" "The legal precedents," the representative began, "show that love isn't bound by species," Alexia finished. She turned to Mark, her logical facade cracking to reveal raw emotion. "I didn't expect this, any of this. My calculations never predicted how it would feel to..." To fall in love? Kalia supplied softly. Hey, I'm winning at falling in love, Zira quipped, but her eyes were soft as she looked at Mark. The protester leader stepped forward. This is clearly Stockholm Syndrome. This, Mark cut in, is family. Maybe not one you understand, but real nonetheless. And I'll fight anyone who tries to break it apart. As will I, Alexia declared, her precise diction carrying absolute certainty. Oh, hell yes, finally some action. Zira bounced on her toes, grinning fiercely. Our emotional bonds are unbreakable, Kalia stated with quiet force. The confrontation escalated faster than anyone expected. The activist leader raised what looked like a teleportation device, its blue light targeting Mark's wives. If you won't come willingly, Mark moved without thinking, placing himself between the device and his family. But before anyone could act, chaos erupted from 3 different directions. Your technology is primitive, Alexia announced, her fingers flying over her tablet. The teleportation device sparked and died. I've already hacked and disabled all your systems. Probability of your success, 0%. Zira vaulted over Mark's shoulder, her athletic form a blur of motion. Finally, some real competition. 3 activists hit the ground before they realized what happened. Though I have to say, you're not much of a challenge. Kalia raised her hands, her gentle presence suddenly filling the air with palpable force. The remaining protesters staggered, overwhelmed by waves of the pure love and devotion she projected. Feel what we feel, she commanded softly. Understand what you're trying to destroy. Mark found himself in the middle of his wives' defensive formation, watching in awe as each demonstrated exactly why they were extraordinary. Alexia had turned their home security system into a technological fortress, her logical mind transforming mundane appliances into defensive weapons. The toaster was particularly adaptable, she noted with a rare smile. Zira moved like a force of nature, her competitive spirit channeled into protecting what was hers. 8 opponents in under 10 seconds. New personal best, she called out, grinning fiercely. Kalia's emotional manipulation had reduced several would-be attackers to tears as they experienced the depth of the family's bonds. They're beginning to understand, she murmured, pressing close to Mark's side. The council representative gaped at the scene before him. Mrs. Henderson's phone had dropped forgotten to her side. Even the protest leader seemed stunned by the display of unity and power. This, Mark declared to the stunned audience, is what real family looks like. Different abilities, different approaches, but united. And if anyone tries to separate us again, I'll hack their entire infrastructure, Alexia finished. After I've kicked their butts, Zira added, while feeling every ounce of our determination, Kalia concluded. In the aftermath of the battle, Mark's relationship with his wives grew even stronger. The local authorities, impressed by their display of unity and power, withdrew their objections. The activists, having experienced Kalia's emotional projection of their family bonds, became unexpected allies in promoting interspecies understanding. One peaceful morning about a month later, Mark woke to find Kalia sitting on the edge of their bed, her expression unreadable. Alexia and Zira were already up. He could hear them in their usual morning routine of mathematical breakfast planning versus competitive coffee brewing. Everything okay? He asked, reaching for her hand. I'm sensing something different, Kalia said softly. Within me, a new emotional signature. Before Mark could process her meaning, Alexia burst into the room, tablet in hand. My biological monitors detected an anomaly in Kalia's hormone levels. The statistical probability suggests... Is something wrong? Zira vaulted over the headboard, landing in a protective crouch. I'll fight whatever it is. I'm pregnant, Kalia announced, her gentle voice cutting through their reactions. The room went silent. Mark felt his heart stop, then restart with a thundering beat. That's... Alexia consulted her tablet, then set it aside with trembling hands. There are no calculations for this moment. Is it possible? Mark asked, his voice hoarse. The genetic compatibility algorithms were theoretical, Alexia explained, moving to sit beside them. No human-Ephyran hybrid has ever... Ha! Our family wins at making history, Zira exclaimed, but her usual competitive enthusiasm was softened by genuine emotion. She knelt before Kalia, placing a gentle hand on her stomach. Little champion in there. The emotional resonance is beautiful, Kalia murmured, tears in her eyes. So much love from all of you. Mark pulled her close, and suddenly all four of them were tangled together on the bed, a mess of tears and laughter and overwhelming joy. I'll research everything about hybrid pregnancies, Alexia promised, her scientific mind already racing. And I'll teach the kid to outrun everyone, Zira added, her face glowing with anticipation. Our child will be unique, Kalia said softly. A bridge between worlds. Mark looked at his wives. The logical mathematician who'd learned to love beyond equations. The fierce competitor who'd found something better than winning. And the gentle empath now carrying their miracle child. We'll give them the best of all our world, he promised. The following months transformed their household in unexpected ways. Alexia converted the spare bedroom into what she called an optimally configured nursery, her usual precision softened by touches that revealed her growing excitement, like the mobile of mathematical symbols that somehow formed a perfect lullaby when spun. The probability of developmental variables requires multiple contingency plans, she explained to Mark late one night, curled against him with her tablet. But I find myself hoping rather than just calculating. Zira channeled her competitive energy into preparations, determined to be the best aunt wife ever, a term she'd coined herself. Watch this, she'd declare, demonstrating increasingly impressive feats of baby-proofing athletics. I can change a diaper in 3.2 seconds. Though, she added more quietly to Mark, maybe we'll practice with a doll first. Kalia's pregnancy affected them all through her empathic abilities. The baby's developing emotional signature brought waves of joy, curiosity, and love that periodically washed over the entire household. The child already loves all of us, she would murmur, guiding their hands to feel the movements. They recognize each of your unique energies. Mark found himself falling even deeper in love with his unusual family. Each night, they would gather in their now shared bedroom, a necessary adaptation that had become a cherished routine. Kalia would rest between them, Alexia monitoring vitals while Zira told increasingly outlandish stories of the athletic feats their child would accomplish. The birth itself was both terrifying and miraculous. All three wives refused to leave the delivery room, each contributing in her own way. Alexia monitored every medical detail with fierce concentration. Zira provided physical support with surprising gentleness. Kalia's empathic abilities helped manage the pain through their shared emotional connection. When their son finally arrived, his first cry was accompanied by a pulse of pure love that brought them all to tears. His skin was human pale like Mark's, but his eyes held the golden glow of Kalia's people. He had Alexia's sharp intelligence in his gaze, and if Zira was to be believed, her athletic potential in his already active kicks. Their son, whom they named Alexander, quickly becoming Alex, proved to be as extraordinary as the circumstances of his birth. At 6 months old, his golden eyes would glow brighter when he laughed, and he showed signs of inheriting traits from all his mothers. His problem-solving abilities are 47.3% above standard developmental curves, Alexia announced proudly one morning, watching him methodically stack blocks. She'd long since stopped trying to hide her emotional investment behind statistics. And did you see how fast he crawls? Zira boasted, chasing after him as he zoomed across the living room floor. Nobody's baby is faster than our baby. Kalia's emotional connection with their son created a bridge that united the entire family. He doesn't just love us, she explained. He understands us. All of us. The neighborhood that had once been hostile now celebrated their success. Mrs. Henderson, their former critic, became Alex's dedicated babysitter. He's a miracle, she'd say, watching him play. A beautiful miracle. When representatives from Project Harmony came to study their success, they found more than they expected. Not just a successful integration, but a true family. Alex's existence proved that humans and aliens could do more than coexist. They could create something entirely new together. Mark stood on their porch one evening, watching the sunset with his son in his arms, while his wives engaged in their usual loving chaos behind him. The probability of the pablum achieving optimal temperature is... Alexia's voice drifted from the kitchen. Race you to see who can warm it faster, Zira challenged. The baby is perfectly content right now, Kalia assured them both. His emotional signature is peaceful. Alex gurgled happily, his golden eyes reflecting the setting sun. Mark felt a profound sense of rightness. His quiet, ordinary life had become extraordinary in the best possible way. Your father is experiencing intense emotions, he heard Kalia say softly. I calculate a 99.9% probability of happiness, Alexia added. Bet I can make him even happier, Zira declared. Mark turned to find all three of his wives watching him with love. They'd come so far from that first awkward meeting. The logical mathematician who'd learned to embrace emotion, the competitor who'd found victory in family, and the empath who'd helped them all connect. I love you, he said simply. All of you. Alex's eyes glowed brighter, as if emphasizing the point. Their miracle child, their bridge between worlds, proof that love could transcend any boundary. The sun set on their extraordinary family, but it was just the beginning of their story. In houses across the galaxy, other Project Harmony couples would learn of their success. Some would follow their path, but none would ever forget the mechanic from Ohio, who learned that family isn't about where you come from, but who you choose to love. Dear listeners, I hope this story touched your heart and made you smile, laugh, and maybe even tear up a little. The journey of Mark and his three extraordinary wives shows us that love truly knows no boundaries, not of space, species, or society's expectations. What did you think about Mark's transformation from a lonely mechanic to the heart of this unique family? Which of his wives resonated with you most? Logical Alexia, competitive Zira, or empathic Kalia? Each brought something special to their relationship, just as each of you brings your own unique perspective to this story. This tale was born from the idea that sometimes the most beautiful families aren't the ones we expect, but the ones we build together. If any part of this story resonated with you, be it the romance, the humor, or the message of acceptance, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Your feedback and thoughts mean the world to me. They help shape future stories and keep the creative spark alive. So please share your reactions, favorite moments, or even what you'd like to see happen next in this universe. Thank you for joining Mark and his family on this adventure. Remember, sometimes the most extraordinary love stories start with an unexpected letter from the government. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts. P.S. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to upvote and share it with others who might appreciate a tale about love that transcends the stars.